You all ready? "31 students, it's definitely an attendance day. Take out a piece of paper." So it looks like some of you have a budget, some of you don't. That is obviously what we're talking about today. One of the things we're talking about today, because it's kind of important. If you make $20 a day or you make $20,000 a day, it's important to know how to spend that money. I would say that there's no, I mean, if you make a ton of money, you could probably do okay if you didn't budget, but you're gonna run out of money eventually, right? You gotta keep an eye on what's coming in and what's going out. What are some of the, those of you who do have a budget, what are some of the like messages you got that made you decide like, I should have a budget?
I decided to create a budget because funds were coming in and I had no idea as to where the funds were going.
Okay. So just kind of your own, for your own peace of mind to know where the money's going, you decided to have one.
I started my budget because I pretty much knew that when you have bills and stuff, like your credit score gets affected, and that's a huge deal. So I kind of needed to make sure that things got paid on time, and you know, just had plenty of money left over for emergencies and stuff like that.
Okay. So
That's clear.
yeah, it makes it easier to be responsible if you have a budget, to know if you have extra money or not.
Getting up in age, I guess.
Okay.
Somewhere in there you realize that you need to have the ability to start, like, as you said, $5 here, $20 here. You have to be able to save, and the only way to really save is to have the budget not get surprised by something.
Okay. Yeah. So to try to build a little cushion for yourself, to try to, it feels really nice when you don't have to worry about being out of money at the end of the month. So just trying to kind of keep that in check as much as possible. Yeah. So those of you who don't have a budget, anyone willing to kind of talk about, like, why not? Have you just never thought about it? Is it like you don't make any money? Like, any?
I have one, but it's really hard to stick.
Okay. Okay.
Like, I've started so many. I try every month to start, but after like a week and a half, I don't know how to control myself.
Okay. Yeah, it is hard to control yourself, right? It is hard. Back in the olden days, we used to have these things called checking registers, which no one uses anymore because why would you? But you would like put in all the deposits and then all of the withdrawals so that you always had an idea of what was in your checking account. We don't generally do that anymore because you can log in on your phone and at any time know how much money you have in your account, but you don't necessarily know what's coming out. So that's sometimes when the surprises come. But it is hard to control sometimes. Sometimes it's hard to, in the moment, be like, oh, I probably shouldn't buy this because I have to pay that bill, that kind of thing. So yeah, some of you may have them and just not use them. And spoiler alert, on Thursday, you're gonna be making a budget. So you can try again this month. So let's talk a little bit about it. When we're talking about budgets, retirement, things like that, what we're really talking about is goal setting. You guys all know this. A goal is something you're trying to accomplish, an end you're trying to attain. We tend to have high life satisfaction when we accomplish our goals. When you have something you want to do and you do it, that feels pretty good. All right. I don't know what that's about. It's probably the ghost, but it'll be all right. So you're setting goals for yourself. And you do that, right? When you're little, people ask, like, what do you want to be when you grow up? Where do you want to go to school? They ask you all these questions, and you set these goals for yourself. You don't often talk about, like, how much money would you like to have in the bank? What age would you like to retire? Things like that. But those are also goals that need to be set at some point. We set short-term goals that are generally like 3 months or less. So like, I want to get an A in this class. That's kind of a short-term goal. Versus like intermediate goals that will be accomplished in less than a year. And then those long-range goals. The short-term goals, the intermediate goals are pretty easy, right? Because they're kind of like here and now. I can start working on them right away. The long-range ones, the ones that take more than a year, are harder because you have to persevere. That's retirement is a long-range goal. You should already be thinking about your retirement. You should already be building your retirement so that you can enjoy it when you get to be that age. Too many people don't. And then they never ever retire because they have no idea what to do with themselves. So those long-range ones, I would argue, are the harder goals to actually accomplish because you lose steam, things change, whatever happens that gets in the way. Also, talking about goals, we have to talk about the different, whose goal it is. There are goals that society has for you. Society tells you you're gonna go to school, you're gonna graduate high school, you're gonna either get a job or you're gonna go to college, then you're gonna get married, then you're gonna start a family, you're gonna work for 30, 40 years, and then you're gonna retire. Like, we have these values that we as a nation and as a society have set, and we expect people to kind of follow them for the most part. Kind of if you take it in a smaller unit, we also have those family goals, what your family expects from you, and what the family expects to accomplish together as a unit. So the ways that they want to do something, maybe they want to start a family business, maybe they want to be able to save enough money to send their kids to college. Whatever those goals are, they're ones that they have to work collaboratively to do. And then the personal goals obviously are the ones you want to accomplish for yourself. Can you think of an example of how like an individual goal you have might be in contradiction to a family goal from your family? Any examples come to mind, either from you or from like media or something like that?
When I was getting ready to go graduate high school, I wanted to join the Army. They had offered me a really nice little package. My father's goal was to keep me out of the military. He didn't want me anywhere near it because he was a Vietnam vet. He didn't want me in it. I gave 2 years and went to school and then went, I'm done. And I joined the Navy. So, but that was a definite distinction on what he wanted me to do. And what society kind of expected me to do, and what I decided was better for me.
Sure, yeah. A lot of times it's things like that. Like, what is your job going to be? Where are you going to go to college? Can you imagine if my kids wanted to go to UNM? No. Anywhere but there might be okay. But yeah, sometimes our family goals don't fit with the individual. And that's where a lot of strife comes in. People either follow their family's goals. I know people who, got into management, got into business, that kind of thing, because that's what their family told them to do. My mom became a teacher because that's what her family told her to do. Is she happy? Would she be happy had she done what she wanted to do? Absolutely. Happier. Same with the people who go into the fields because of the money. Oh, you should be in business because there's good money. But you hate business and maybe you don't know how to do math. Like, is it worth following your family's goals if you're going to be miserable? These are the contradictions that we have. And generationally, we see that happening too, where some generations have been more amenable to following the family's goals and some have not. And I would say probably more recently, our millennials are doing a better job of saying like, no, I'm going to chase my own goals because ultimately I want to be happy. But we still have a family we belong to. Still have to go to the family reunions or lunch on Sunday or whatever it is and answer questions to everyone about what you're doing with your life, what your plans are. So there's a very strong emotional connection to our goals and the goals that we have for ourselves and in our families and in society. So that can be one of the reasons that money's so hard for people, because there's the emotional connection to it. It's not just business. It's not just spending money and making money. It's, if someone gives me, I was talking to a client yesterday and grandma gave them some money to pay for a legal thing that they needed to do. So done, no, that's a transaction, whatever. Then they decided they wanted to have elective surgery. But now I can't tell grandma I'm having elective surgery because she gave me money for my lawyer. So I have to try to make up this concocted story, because if someone gave me money and then I had my own money and didn't spend it on that thing, am I taking advantage? Do you see how complicated it gets for people? And like emotional now, like when, I mean, the elective surgery is going to be obvious. People are going to be able to tell there has been a surgery that has taken place. You're going to just lie to grandma about it? It gets really complicated. So when we talk to people about their goals, and this is something we do when we work with families, is talk about their goals. How do they complement each other? How is it able to say, like, I will give you money and I can't tell you how to spend it, which is a big thing people want to do. So that's something we have to remember working with families when we talk about their goals, even financial goals, because it sounds so simple. It's money. There's only so much of it. You got to figure out how to spend it. But when all that competing emotional stuff goes on, it gets really hard to do. So we start saying, okay, family, we got to sit down. Let's make some goals. Let's identify what we want to do. Let's get a plan in place for meeting our goals. We start with the goal. All planning begins with a decision. We are going to save money to go to Disneyland this summer. We are going to plan a trip to the Grand Canyon. We have some sort of decision that we have made, a goal we have set for ourselves. From there, we have to figure out, okay, what do we got to do to make that happen? Let's put it in a plan in place. Let's implement the plan, and then let's see how it works. That is like plan setting 101. Everyone knows that, right? No, so many people don't know that. They're like, well, I want to go to Disney World, so I'm going to book a flight. Like, okay, when are you going? Oh, that's hurricane season. Do you really want to schedule your flight for hurricane season? Where are you staying? You can't just show up at Disneyland and be like, okay, I'm here. Like all these kinds of things, but people do that all the time. So again, our job is to help them kind of work through the steps and think about what they need to do in order to make that plan happen. The types of plans that we have, we've identified directional ones. They say we're going to do this. We're going to head towards this goal. Contingency plans say if this doesn't work, we'll do this. It's plan B, basically. So, okay, this is our goal. This is our plan, our directional plan. This is where we're heading. If something gets in the way, what are our alternative options? Could we maybe go to Western Playland instead? Whatever that contingency plan is. They're good to have sometimes, but we'll talk about that more in a minute. Proactive plans, we are going to get ahead of any possible problems. We're going to think about what could get in the way and how can we avoid it. So we're really going to think about like, okay, if we're trying to do this and we have to buy a new set of tires, that's going to set us back. What are the possible things that are going to get in the way, and how can we try to mitigate that? How can we try to keep those from getting in the way? That's being proactive about it versus the reactive planning, which is like, oh, I didn't think that was going to happen. What are we going to do about it? Always better to be proactive than reactive. But that's what we're doing. We're making a plan, and then we're talking about, okay, how are we going to make this happen, and what might get in the way? I think that's the step most families miss. Because you don't want to think about that. You don't want to be a buzzkill. You don't want to be the Debbie Downer who says, wait, what about this or that? But that helps your plan to be more carefully thought out. Come back to this contingency plan for a minute, because there is some research to support the notion that having a plan B makes you more likely to fail. Why would that be?
Because you're okay with like your first plan not going.
Okay, yeah, because you're kind of like, yeah, I'll be okay if the first plan doesn't go through. You're not all in, 100%, absolutely no way I'm giving up this plan. Sure. So there is some research to support that. But that gets really tricky, right? Can you just not have contingency plans? No, because then you become reactive. So it's a matter of kind of reconciling that maybe it's going to be okay if my first plan doesn't work out because I have a contingency plan, but I can live with that. Something that, again, people just don't really think a whole lot about or talk a whole lot about. And sometimes spontaneity is fun and exciting, but only if you can afford it. So there's some links on here. You can get the PowerPoint and you can look at these yourself. But basically, what we want to remind people is that the way the government budgets is not the way we want to budget. The government operates at a deficit. They just like print more money, and then we're billions of dollars in the hole, but that's okay. Like, it's all this theoretical type of budgeting when it comes to the government. We can't be theoretical in our budgeting. You can, but at a certain point, it's going to catch up with you, and the bank's going to call and say, we're taking your car back. So just a reminder, like, this is not the model we want to use. We don't want people to use the government's plans for budgeting as our plans. What we want to do is plan a budget that talks about what are we going to do with the money we bring in? How are we going to allocate it? Budgets must be flexible. You have to build in some wiggle room, because depending if the month has 28 days or 31 days, sometimes your bills fluctuate, right? Based on the number of days. In the summer, my electric bill's like $700. In the winter, my electric bill's like $75. I have to build in flexibility in my budget because I'm not going to sweat. So I got to figure out, how am I going to make that work so that my budget can accommodate changes in heating and cooling. There are a lot of expenses that are going to be variable, that are going to change month to month based on your usage, things like that. And then you're going to have some fixed expenses too. Every month, this costs this amount, period. What are some of the fixed costs? House payment, rent, those are going to be the same. Mortgage, absolutely, yeah, house payment.
But that depends on whether or not you have a fixed payment or fixed payment.
But you still know every month what you're paying. Yes. What are some other student loans? Yeah, those are pretty consistent. Other things that you pay the exact same amount every month.
The internet.
Internet, not mine, but
Really? Car insurance.
yeah. Use a lot of internet. Car insurance. Yeah, so there is some expenses you can count on. I have to pay $50 a month for this. My rent is $325 a month, like whatever it is. Those are the ones you can count on. The ones that are variable are the harder ones to account for because you just don't know. You know, if you set aside $150 a month for gas for your car, and you end up having to go home for a couple weeks and do a lot of driving, maybe you run over that budget that month. Maybe gas goes up. That always happens. So those are things you have to be able to build cushions in for. You've got to make decisions. You've got to communicate, and you've got to compromise, unless it's just you. But even then, you have to make compromises with yourself, right? Because you're like, I know I didn't budget anything for this month for shoes, but these are really cute shoes. So maybe I need to go ahead and, I can just eat ramen this week. It's totally fine. Like, I'll eat ramen and then I'll buy the shoes. So you even compromise with yourself, but more so with family. So deciding, what are we going to spend things on? What are our priorities? Communicating with the people involved in that process about what their needs are and their priorities are. And then deciding what to do. I've talked a lot about cable this year because it's ridiculously expensive. And it doesn't have to be anymore. You can get Hulu. So kind of compromising, talking with the family about, okay guys, we're gonna give up cable. We're gonna switch to either no TV at all, or Hulu, or Netflix, or one of the other services that are a lot cheaper. The family is involved in that decision. And the conversation then becomes, and with that extra money we're saving, we need to allocate it somewhere also. Remember when we're working with families that we're limited in our disposable income. You all know disposable income, right? That's money that you could just spend. Like it's not allocated for bills. It's the extra money that you have to go to movies, eat out, those kinds of things. That's a limited amount every month based on how much we're bringing in. So we need to be able to talk about that. We need to be able to decide how we spend that money. There are 3 different configurations that couples use generally. Of course, there's always some creative stuff going on, but generally if you have a couple, you want to ask them how they're managing their finances, and usually it's one of 3 ways. It's either like we each have our own separate accounts, you pay these bills, you pay these bills, everything's just split, or we throw all the money into one pot and it all goes, we just both have equal free access to it, we both spend it, or we take a certain percentage of our money and put it into the shared pot, and that's the money we pay bills out of, and then we each keep some of our own money to be able to spend for the things we want, to buy gifts for each other, things like that. Each of those obviously has pros and cons to it. None of them are bad. It only just matters whether or not the couple is comfortable with that decision and can support it. If they're sharing the same pot and one of them really likes to go buy Starbucks every day, so you're looking at $6 a day, like $40 a week, this person's spending on Starbucks, and the other person doesn't drink coffee or tea or whatever, they just don't. They might start to resent that person buying Starbucks. They might start to think like, well, here you are spending an extra $40 a week on coffee and I'm not. So they have to be able to negotiate that. That's why a lot of people like to say, like, you take your money, do whatever you want. If you want to spend it on Starbucks, spend it on Starbucks. If I want to save it, I'll save it. But they gotta figure out together how they're gonna manage their money. And they should really do that at the start of the relationship. Most people don't. But if we ever do, you know, if someone does come for premarital counseling, that's one of the big topics we talk about. Like, what is your plan for money? How did your family manage money? And how do you want to manage money? Because if y'all aren't on the same page, number 1 cause of divorce, financial issues. Even more so than infidelity or anything else. Financial fidelity is a big deal in a relationship. So as people are getting together, as families are being formed, they've got to talk about this and they've got to come up with a strategy that they are comfortable with. Excel is the easiest probably way to set a budget. You can find a bazillion templates online. They look really intimidating and scary. If you're not a spreadsheet person, you look at this and you're like, my mom would be like she wouldn't get it. This is not her realm. So she'd just be paralyzed with fear. But some people love this because it's so clear and cut and dried. So you kind of have to decide what works for you. Beyond these tools, within Excel, you can build little pie charts and stuff like that that make it a little more user-friendly and a little less intimidating, because everyone has a different type of mind and everyone sees this differently. But this is basically, and I know you can't see the details from here, but it basically lays out like how much money are we bringing in, what are fixed expenses, what are variable expenses. This one breaks it down into home expenses like electricity, gas, mortgage, phone, stuff like that, plus daily living expenses like groceries, personal supplies, clothes, things like that, dog food, dry cleaning, whatever. And then, you know, credit card bills, stuff like that. So you can get in a very quick snapshot, a very clear picture of, if this is how much money I make, and this is how I spend it, what am I gonna have left at the end of the month? Can I afford my bills? Because a lot of times you end up with those little red brackets up there that say you cannot afford your bills. And the only way to get that back on the black is either to have fewer bills or make more money. Neither of those are very easy to do. I have always preferred just making more money. But at some point you gotta stop spending money too. So this is a very simple budget. It can get crazy complicated if you want it to. but it doesn't have to. And I think that's what people forget. Like, it doesn't have to be super involved. You don't have to every day sit down and track your budget. But you probably should keep an eye on it every once in a while. I logged into my bank account last week and found out someone had taken $467 out of my account. Oopsie. Like, had I not looked at my bank account, guess what? I'd be out $467. But I just happened to look and I was like, wait a minute. I didn't buy anything from China. So, yeah. Luckily, banks are taking care of that. I said, hey, dudes, I didn't spend this money. And they said, okay, you can have it back. Had I not noticed, like my mom, I swear to God, she never checks her bank account. You can take whatever you want out of her account. She's not going to know. You got to keep an eye on your budget. You got to check it every once in a while and make sure you got the money. Things happen. People accidentally take $467 out of your account. They forget to pay you. Things happen. There was a thing about a year and a half ago here at NMSU where someone somehow was able to get direct deposit paychecks of some of the professors who were making, like engineering professors, they were making good money. All of a sudden, they weren't getting paid. And the university was like, no, we totally paid you. Like, here's your pay stub. Someone had switched the bank account those deposits were going into. So like this, I don't even know how much, I don't even want to know because it'll make me mad how much money they got in their paychecks every 2 weeks. They weren't getting it. And it took probably 3 or 4 months to get it straight. So fortunately, like I said, they make a ton of money, so they were okay. But what if that was one of our work study students who needs that money every month to pay the bills? And they're having to wait 3 or 4 months. Do you think the apartment cares if your checking account got messed up? No. So that's why you got to check in on this stuff and keep an eye on it pretty regularly. Otherwise, you can find yourself in this huge mess that you'll get out of, but it'll take a really long time. And not everyone has a lot of, not everyone has $467 extra that they can be without in their account. But it happens. So checking on your budget is important. Obsessing about your budget is not. I think once a week is probably pretty adequate. Maybe every 2 weeks if you don't spend a whole lot day to day. But keep an eye on it. Check it out. See where you're at in the middle of the month. Instead of like, okay, the month's over. Let me see how I did last month. Oops. Yeah, so now November I have like $300 less because I spent it last month and I didn't realize it. So keeping an eye on it proactively prevents you from having to be reactive later on. Questions, comments?
One of the things, like, since I share my budget with my husband, who makes the money, and I'm the bill payer, and he usually doesn't check in with me like 3 or 4 months, and sometimes like we're just like way off, and then he'll say, what happened? And I'm like, I don't know, So now I have to start writing down. I did this for me because I want to have an answer. Like, hey, yeah, car tax came up, that's why we're over. Or, hey, remember that you bought? That's why we're over. So I
Sure.
tried to add that into the budget as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you want to have an idea about like how much leeway do we have if the new phone comes out and we want to buy it. How much do we have? But you have to communicate about those kinds of things, That's the biggest part of all of this is having those conversations. We recommend families sit down and have a family meeting and talk about the budget once in a while. Let the kids be involved in that. I know it's hard. My kids, like, I'm like, how much money do you have in your account? Oh, I don't know, I've got like $100. Wow, you're rich. Like, yeah, okay. Like, they don't always get it, but they need to hear you talking about money. They need to understand that money is a real thing. My little guy will give you, if you ever want money, just ask him. He will give you everything he has. Because he don't know the difference between a $1 bill and a $50 bill. And I know that to be true because he'll take a $50 bill and give it to someone. Like, here you go, here's $5. No, not $5. You have to teach them the value of money. Otherwise, they have no idea. It's just paper with numbers on it. And if you're dyslexic like him, you don't even necessarily know what the numbers are. So we have to have kids involved in those conversations too. They don't need to know the nitty-gritty because sometimes that gets complicated when they go to school. Like sometimes the teachers think it's a really good idea to be like, ask your parents how much money they make. We're going to do activity on it based at school. And then the one kid's like, oh yeah, my mom makes $125,000 a year. And the other kid's like, my mom makes $25,000 a year. Like, they don't need the numbers necessarily. They need to be involved in the conversations to understand the negotiation process, the decision-making process. Look at this chart. You see how that's red? That means we don't have money. Well, can't you just put it on your credit card? Let me tell you why we can't do that. They need to be a part of those conversations so they learn financial skills as well. One of the problems with that is that a lot of parents don't have the financial skills to teach their kids. That's where programs like Dave Ramsey and all those come in that we'll talk about at some point. But this is a conversation the whole family needs to have together. Again, the kids don't always need the specific nitty-gritty numbers. They don't ever need to feel guilty because they need shoes. And their parents had to decide, like, okay, well, if they need shoes, we'll just go ahead and do without this or whatever. Like, they don't necessarily have to have the emotional kind of stuff, but they just need to get, like, hey, if we decide to do this, we have to take it from somewhere. So getting them involved in those family meetings can be really beneficial for them later on. Yeah. We can skip this, read it for yourself, symbolic interactionism. Let's go on to talking about net worth. Any other questions, comments about like the budget type stuff? Not hard, like on paper, but it's really hard day to day when you're making those decisions. At some point, you develop a net worth. You are building some sort of net worth. This is, if you take everything you have and subtract everything you owe, that's how much you have. A lot of people are in the negative there. You know, people joke about I'm worth more dead than alive, but sometimes that's true because life insurance. But basically what we're trying to figure out is, what does someone have? If something were to happen, does this person have resources? Do they have assets that would help them to be able to weather that storm? This is the only way we can do this, and it matters. If you've ever applied for a loan, if you've ever tried to get some sort of credit, they want to know, what do you have? If you default on this loan, what do we get since you're not going to pay us? Do we get the car back? Do we get the house back? People want to know your net worth, and sometimes it matters. It matters in all those financial business type things. But the problem becomes when people value this more than other things. You know, when it gets to the point of feeling like, well, I'm a failure because I don't have a huge net worth. I don't own a home, I'm a failure. I don't make enough money, I'm a failure. So we really want to be able to kind of help people understand that balance. Your net worth does not make you a good person. You can be filthy rich and a total jerk. And you can be filthy poor and an amazing person. But there are reasons we look at net worth. We want to help people be able to delineate, why is it important and how does it not matter at all. Financial planning. This is huge business. What do we want to do with our money? How do we want to see our money grow? Do we want to invest our money? Things like that. So this is that long-term planning. This is sitting down and thinking about, okay, now that I have a job and I'm making money, what should I do with it? There's an article that's been circling on social media lately that talks about something like 6 things you should do once you make over $70,000 a year. And it's things like, oh, set up a retirement account, blah, blah, blah. Those should be done well before you make $70,000 a year. But the problem is people don't think about financial planning, because honestly, when you're making like $1,000 a month, the plan is, I'd like to be able to eat on the 30th of the month. You don't have a whole lot of planning, but you can. So how do we manage our money so that we can pay our bills, we can have things that we want, and we can have a buffer for those worst case scenarios? If we get sick and can't work. If you get sick and can't work for, let's say, 6 weeks, if you have disability insurance or if you have paid leave or something like that, you're going to be okay. If you don't, there's no money. So how do we make that part of our financial plan? How do we start that savings account? How do we buy things like critical health or long-term disability and short-term disability insurance? How do we get those things in place to be able to help provide that buffer? Because getting sick should not devastate you financially. Too many people have to still go to work even though they're sick because they don't have the leave. And then what happens? They get everyone else in the office sick. And they feel like crap. But they're like, well, gotta pay the bills, whether I'm sick or not. So when we look at financial planning, how can we prepare for that? How can we plan for that kind of stuff? How can we plan for things like college, travel, long-term care? People are living longer and they've got to be taken care of. Who's going to do that? Are we going to buy a home at some point? How are we going to save money? All those kinds of things are expenses that go into a financial plan. And then again, kind of the long-term, what do I want to spend all my money before I die? Do I want to set up an account to pass on to future generations? Like some people say, and knowing what I know about the Medicare system, it's better to spend it in a lot of ways. Because if you have too many assets, if you own a home, things like that, you don't qualify for some assistance if you need to go into a nursing home. So you're paying $3,000 a month out of pocket. So sometimes it's better to not have a ton of money. Doesn't mean you have to spend it. You got to put it in a trust. There are ways to protect that money and still get what you need, but you have to sit down with a planner and figure that out. If I make this money, if I continue to work and develop and accrue this savings, what's the best way to protect that money and also get what I need as I'm getting older? Goals are the big part. How long do you want to live? They'll ask you that question. And it may sound dumb, like 110 sounds good. Some people are like, yeah, 70, 75, that's about all I want. So how long do you want to live? What kind of lifestyle do you want? Do you want to retire when you're 52? Or do you want to retire when you're 80? All these kinds of questions you have to answer to set up those goals. I will retire when I'm 52 years old because I'll have been here 25 years. I'm out, guys. I'm not sticking around. But that means 52, let's say I live till 82. I got 30 years that I got to fund. So I got to start, when I got this job, planning for that. How am I going to set aside enough money so that I can retire when I want to and not be poor? Because what's the point in working so hard and then being poor? So you got to think about those kinds of things. How long do you want to work? And it's all best case scenario, because if you can't work, then you have to have those contingency plans. But this is what people are not doing much of, the financial planning stuff. It's always something that people think like, yeah, at some point I'll get to this. When I get a good job, I'll worry about this. And think about all the professional athletes who are broke. They made millions of dollars in their contracts and it's all gone because they didn't have a good financial plan in place. They had people taking advantage of them and exploiting them because they didn't know what they were doing. They let someone else manage their money and it's gone now. So one financial plan is make a lot of money. Pretty good plan. Win the lottery, make a lot of money, have some sort of success. That's not enough. What do you do with that money once you have it? You got to invest it. You got to save it. You got to not give it away for stupid things. Oh my gosh. The guy with the horn mustache, what is his name? There's a professional athlete right now who's kind of big. He's doing some pretty good things. I cannot remember his name, but I will. But this kid, I think he's like 23, 24, doing really well, bright, successful career, making tons of money. He still drives the Corolla that his mom bought him when he graduated from college. He lives in an apartment. He didn't buy a big old house when he got his contract. He's like, I'm going to see how this goes. He's doing it right. People like Devon House came to MSU, played for Green Bay for several years, made good money. But you know what he did with it? He saved it and he invested it. So now when he's not playing, guess what? He still has money left over. But it takes a lot of work to do that. And it takes a lot of brains and knowledge to do that. So that's why financial planning is so huge right now. It's because people don't have those skills. We don't teach these skills enough for people to recognize, like, it's not enough just to get a big old contract. What if you get hurt? What if you're Antonio Brown and no one will touch you and all of a sudden all that guaranteed money is gone? Then what? Do you have a plan beyond that? That's what we have to be able to talk with people about. And if you're making millions, the conversation is exactly the same as if you're making thousands. The numbers are different, but the decision-making, the compromising, all of that is exactly the same. So that's what you have to remember. If you're going into this field, you're not gonna make a lot of money, guys. Sorry, you're just not. Like, you can be fine, but you're not gonna be rich. You don't get into family services, social services, any of the social sciences for the money, because you're just not gonna make it. But you can set yourself up to have a really nice life, to have your bills paid, to have a good savings, to have money to burn, if you plan accordingly. And that's what we need people to understand. It doesn't matter how much you're making, you still gotta make a plan. Savings, it's a good, simple way to keep money safe. How many of you have a savings account? How many of them are high interest savings accounts? Not many. So you get like pennies a month from your savings account, which is, hey, money's money, like, take it. But as you start to kind of think about savings accounts, you realize, like, maybe I need a high interest savings account. Savings alone is not enough. You gotta have a savings account. What is the rule? How much should you have in a savings account?
3 months.
At least 3 months, 3 to 6 months of your expenses you should have in an account in case something happens. I'm not gonna ask, but how many of you have that? Like, really? So once you have that, once you've got your savings account, the rest of the money needs to be invested. Just putting it in your savings account, you're gonna have a huge savings account and you're not gonna get any return on that money. So you get your buffer set up and then you invest. You put the money elsewhere in more aggressive things where you can make a lot more. You buy Bitcoin, you play the stock market, securities. You find some way to make your money grow without you having to do anything. And it's fun. It's like kind of exciting. You log in and you're like, oh yeah, I made some money today. Like, you know, my Bitcoin's up today. But you know what? It was down yesterday by like $800. So now I'm up by like $801 and I'm like, oh, I'm winning again. It's basically gambling, but it can make you some money. And that's basically, why I'm saying that is because retirement in a lot of ways is gambling. You set up a retirement plan and you give someone else your money and they get to play with it. And in exchange for playing with it, they're gonna go ahead and give you some extra money back. Retirement is something everyone needs, but again, it's risky. If you remember, I'm trying to think, it was like, I guess 2008, right about the time we were bailing out Wall Street, 2007, 2008-ish. There are a lot of people in the federal government who had worked their years of service. They were about ready to retire. They had still pretty aggressive retirement accounts, and the markets tanked. Guess what happened to those retirement accounts? They couldn't afford to retire anymore. That money was gone. So they had to work 5 or 10 more years to recoup their losses. So retirement is something that can be risky. That's why people need to be informed about the decisions they're making. Generally, what you want is you want to work for a really long time, and then you want to not work for a really long time. That's the goal. You want to be able to travel or play golf or sleep late or whatever it is you want to do, but not have to clock in and clock out to keep earning money. You want the money that you work so hard for to then work for you. You want to maintain your standard of living. If you're smart, if you can, you get your house paid off, you get your car paid off before you retire, so that then you don't have those bills every month after retirement. You can actually have a little more money in your account. But basically, you got to plan for this now. Like I said, a lot of people don't, and then they're like, well, I guess I'm working till I die because I can't afford it. You know, those memes that say, like, I have just enough money in my account. If I retire today, I can live for about a day and a half on my retirement. Like, that's a real thing. So you got to begin this at any age. I say start now. Start planning for your retirement now. When you're interviewing for jobs, find out what they offer as far as retirement packages. Do they offer anything, or do you need to get your own? Whether they offer it or you have to get your own, every paycheck, they're going to take something out for retirement. And that money is going to go somewhere. That person is going to hold on to it, and they're going to play with it. They're going to invest it. They're going to do whatever they want to. And in exchange, they're going to give you some interest on it. Like I said, you can be highly aggressive with that. You can decide, I want the really risky stocks because those make money quickly. That's like playing roulette. Go to Vegas, you can win big fast, and you can lose big fast. But that's what you do when you're young. High risk retirement. I want to, let's take some chances here because I've got a long time to go, so I can afford to take the risk. As you get older, every 5-10 years, you want to lower that risk a little bit because you're getting closer to the retirement age. You want to not have all of it gone. So you're going to pull back your risk a little bit. But you start that the day you get your job. You're going to walk in, they're going to have a ton of papers for you to sign, and they're going to say, what kind of portfolio would you like for your retirement account? And you're going to say, what? I don't know. Let me talk to my mom or my dad or my uncle or someone and ask them. But you're going to have to make those decisions. How much are you going to contribute from your paycheck? If you're working for a company that matches, like not an MSU, but other companies, they'll be like, we will match your contributions to your retirement up to 6%. That's pretty standard. Some will do more. So how much should you contribute? 6%. Because then they're also contributing 6%. So you're getting double the money for only 50% investment. That seems kind of expensive sometimes, but you always want to, if they're going to match it, max it out. Let them give you as much money as they can. A lot of companies don't match it. They say, you put in what you can afford to put in, we're not going to match it for you. Then you really look at, okay, how much can I afford? Maybe I can only afford 3% right now. 3% of my paycheck, I want you to put into my retirement every month. But then when I get a raise, instead of taking that extra cash, because it's going to be nothing every week in a paycheck, let's take that amount and put it to my retirement account. Because I'm already used to living with this amount of money. So let me keep living with this amount of money and put more away. So I increase it and I think about it every year or two. How much do I want to continue to invest? Do I want to raise it? Do I want to lower it? Do I want to continue to be high risk or not? These are conversations that you need to already be thinking about because you're going to have to make those decisions. At some point, you're going to graduate from here probably, hopefully, and you're going to get a job. Or you're going to be interviewing for jobs and you're going to want to know, like, what are your retirement packages? What do you offer? Do you match or not? Who do you go through? Things like that. Because there are other games in town. You don't have to just go through your employer's retirement account. But it's a good way to get started. Most of them now have representatives from the company. Merrill Lynch, Charles Schwab, TIAA, CREF, whoever it is. The employer will bring in a representative to talk to you and answer your questions and help you to understand, okay, let's run the numbers. Let's show you how much 3% will be by retirement age if you start now, that kind of stuff. So you can always get help with this. But if you know what you're talking about a little bit, there's less chance that you're going to get taken advantage of. It's just some dumb kid who doesn't really know better. So you got to start thinking about this. You got to understand this stuff. You're not going to see that money. It'll be out of your account before you get your paycheck. So it doesn't hurt too bad. It doesn't hurt like taxes do. Because taxes, you're like, oh, there went that money. 40% of my paycheck, bye. Never saw it. Retirement, at least you see, like, I didn't see that, but I'm getting it back. That's my money. Question?
Yes.
Okay.
So I've been researching Bitcoin.
Okay.
But I don't know anybody who does. Like, I'm researching, right, so who did you go through? Because there's like so many of them, and then I look and research them, and they're like, don't go with them, this is a scam. So you're literally the only person who I physically know who is into it, and I really want to do it.
Yeah, I use Coinbase.
Coinbase.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's a little bit off topic from retirement.
I know, but it's for my
There you go. Yeah, don't make Bitcoin your retirement plan. That's a terrible plan. I made it my concert ticket money. But yeah, there are, and that's a good question. With retirement accounts, with investments, all that kind of stuff, you gotta go with someone who's reputable.
right.
Because you can be taken advantage of and you can have your money stolen. And there are protections built in, but they're not always that good. There's corruption, believe it or not. People try to steal money from you sometimes. So you do need to know the reputation. You do need to meet the people who are managing your money. You do need to look at their track record because you can't give your money to just anybody. Some people are honest, some people are not. How do you know the difference? You don't. There's no way to know, but you hedge your bets. Question?
So you're saying in regards to, going back to the savings part, after you build up over in excess of 3,000 in your savings?
No, 3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months worth of expenses. That's gonna vary for everybody. Yeah.
Take the rest of it and
Invest it. Absolutely. Yep, more bang for your buck. Savings isn't gonna get you much. It gets you security. You want security. Once you got security, you wanna make money. So absolutely. There are different types of retirement accounts. 401k is probably the most common corporate one that you're gonna hear about. 403bs, that's usually what an MSU has. We actually have both. And then there's IRAs. There's all kinds of different retirement accounts. And what you wanna know is what's gonna be the best for me. Like I said, MSU has both. So I'm actually in both systems. I've got the state retirement, which is crappy, but kind of guaranteed. And I've got the other one that's better, but more risky. So sometimes you pick and choose, but you become informed. Before you make any of these choices and decisions, you need to talk to someone and you need to understand this. And that's the message you have to give to families too. It's important what you do with your money and who you give it to. So educate yourself before you sign the paperwork. There are different types of accounts. A lot of them, they take the money out of your check so that you're paying less income tax every year because the money that they take out to go to your retirement account, you're not taxed on until you withdraw it. So that's one way to do it. Like I take, let's say I'm rich. I take $4,000 a month and I put it in my retirement account. So that $4,000 a month comes off of my taxable income. That's one way. Then when I retire and I'm taking that money back out, then I pay taxes on it. That's one way to do it. The other way to do it is I'm going to pay taxes on it now so that when I'm retired, I'm getting that money, I'm not paying it. I've already paid those taxes. You got to decide what's best for you because there's pros and cons to both. But these are the things people need to understand and just don't. And it is complicated and it is confusing, but it is not so confusing that a reasonably educated person cannot understand it. Sometimes financial people don't want you to not understand it because they want you to ask them for help. Don't rely on that. Understand it for yourself. Get someone you trust to explain it to you. Then when you retire, you can enjoy your life. So the things that they're going to look at for your retirement needs, your age, your salary, how many retirement accounts you have, if you have other investments, how long you are going to be employed, percentage, like there's all this stuff they're going to want to know about you to understand like what's going to be the best fit for you. If you start working when you're 18, you have a lot more years of work in you versus if you start at 30. So they have to figure that out. If you start at 18, you don't have to put as much in because you've got that many more years to put it in. They're going to look at all this kind of stuff and they're going to try to help you make a plan that works best for you. The thing that I want you to remember about all of this, and we'll talk more specifically about some of the different types, but the one part of it is the financial planning. That's important. The other part that's equally important is the life planning. So many people become depressed once they retire because their whole identity was who they were at work. That's what they did their whole life. They got up every morning, they went to work, they came home every day, they went to bed to get ready for work the next day. So much of our identity, so much of our life is spent working, that if we're not also developing our life outside of work, what's the point in retiring? We have people who wouldn't retire here because they had nothing outside of work to look forward to. And that's really sad. So in addition to the financial planning that you're doing, you also have to kind of plan the life outside of work. You need to have that balance of, you know what, I love my job. I really do. I love my job. But the minute I don't have to do it anymore, I'm not coming back because I got things to do outside of here. But what if I didn't? What if I didn't have family? What if I didn't have friends? What if I didn't have hobbies? I wouldn't. I'd keep working. Don't be that person. That's really sad. Figure out now, how do I balance my life? How do I make sure that I make time for friendships and hobbies and things like that so that I have something to look forward to when I retire? Because so many people don't, and then they get depressed and they go back to work. And if you want to go back to work because you enjoy it, that's great. If you want to go back to work because you got nothing else, that's not okay. So we'll talk a little bit more about this, but when we talk about retirement planning, the one part we're talking about is the money, and the other part is the emotional part of it, which in my money is a lot bigger. So, different types of IRAs that they have. Traditional IRA. It's a good choice for people who want the tax deduction. If your income is over a certain point, you don't qualify for a Roth IRA. So a lot of people have just traditional IRAs. This is what works for like a vast majority of people. Roth IRAs are good for people who take the money after they retire without taxes. The traditional one, you're taxed when you take it out of retirement. The Roth, you're taxed ahead of time so that in retirement you're not paying those taxes. It's paying it up front versus paying it on the back end. If you can qualify for a Roth IRA, it has to do with your income. It can be a good choice because it does help you in retirement to have more money. You pay it now, not later. These are all things people want to have conversations about. You want to talk to people about what might be best for you. Roth IRAs aren't bad. Traditional IRAs aren't bad. Which one's going to work best for you is a decision you have to make with a solid financial planner. Questions, comments, and again, like there's so many options. We're not going to get into all of them, but just understand there are different ways of doing it, and everyone's going to be different what works for them. All right, so let's talk about couples and money. Like I talked about, number one reason people get divorced, finances. More so than infidelity, more so than other things. If the money situation in the couple is wrong, they're going to have problems. Decisions need to be made about who handles the money. Someone brings it in, someone writes the bills. Is that the same person? Is that a different person? One person handles all the finances, the other person has no idea what's going on with them. How do we reconcile that? Remember, money is power. The person who has the power in the relationship controls the money. So how do we want to work that out? Does it matter? I think I talked about this a couple weeks ago, maybe, where I have a couple where they're getting divorced now, and she stayed home with the kids because they agreed that's what they wanted to do. But now that they're divorcing, he's saying, hey, this is my money. I'm the one who earned this money. So how do you quantify the work she did in the family to raise the family when you're talking about splitting up income and stuff like that? So who makes the money? Who had an inheritance? This couple I'm talking about had the additional complication of him getting an inheritance when his dad died. Giant chunk of money. And he's saying, that's money my dad saved for me. You can't have any of it. So we got to go to the state and say, what does the state say about that? Community property, maybe it's half hers. So are those other financial resources out there that are involved in this too, beyond just the paychecks that you make? Did you move into your family's house? Did your family give you a house? I have another couple. I do a lot of work with people who are divorcing. They're gonna split up, but the house that they live in was his parents, and they signed it over to them, to the couple. But she's like, I can't take that house. That's your family's house. Your family gave that to you. So what do you do there? It gets really complicated. And most of the time, people talk about this when they're divorcing, not when they're marrying. So couples need to talk about who is going to handle the money. How much do I want to know? Do I want to know what's going on with the money or not? Some people don't know how much their partner earns. They're like, I don't know. Maybe they make $10,000 a year. Maybe they make $100,000 a year. I don't know. Like, some people don't have any conversations about money, and it's really weird. And then a big part of it is, do you feel rich or poor? Because again, that emotional part. Even there are people who have money in the bank. Like, they got some money, they're fine, but they grew up in poverty, or for some reason they've had experiences where they feel poor. They feel like we have to save every penny because the bottom could fall out from under us at any point in time, and we can't tolerate that. But then the partner's like, dude, we have money. Like, stop worrying about it. So that emotional piece of, do you feel rich or poor, really impacts spending habits, financial decisions, things like that. Money is very personal, even more so than sex sometimes. I'd rather have sex with you than tell you how much money I make. That's a big thing for people. Like, oh no, you can see me naked, but you can't see my bank account. Like, there's a very weird emotional thing that people do with their income because they relate it to who they are as a person. They relate it to the value that they have. Thinking about your family now, how many of your parents talk to you about money? How many of you know how much your parents make? A couple of you, not a lot. How many of your parents talk to you about money? Almost the same group. Okay. How many of you, like, no clue? I maybe know what my parents do for a living, but I don't know how much they make. There's some of that too, yeah. So the way you're raised is going to inform the way you raise your children or you engage in your family. We got to involve our family. We've got to take the stigma out of it. When do you talk about money becomes an issue when people are dating. How soon do I let people know? There are people who are wealthy and they say, I'm really afraid to tell someone I'm dating that I'm wealthy because then I'm always worried they're dating me for my money, not for who I am. So I don't tell them for a while. But then at some point, we're getting along. I really feel like there's some potential here. And then I tell them, and it changes things. So it gets really complicated. When do you talk about that with a potential partner? And how do you talk about that? Because once someone knows, they see you differently. And that's just the way it is. Like, we see people as rich or poor. And once we do, we make judgments about them. We assume things about them, and we carry that. And it's the whole Cinderella story, right? But think about Made in Manhattan, or the new movie that J-Lo did more recently, same thing, like pretending to be rich even though you're not, and then he finds out, and it's this whole thing. But those stories come from this. Those stories come from people not knowing how to talk about money, not knowing how to separate someone's financial picture from who they are as a person. So it becomes really complicated. And when you're working with families, you'll hear them say that. They'll talk about how hard it is and how complicated it is. Some of the things we can do to help facilitate that, to help couples be better at this, talk to your partner about why you view money the way you do. Why are you so stingy with your money, or why are you so generous with your money? Talk about your own experiences growing up so that your partner can understand where you're coming from better. Talk to them about your childhood. Did you see your parents stand in line to get their food stamps? That would shape you. Or did you never have any idea about money at all? You just had everything you ever wanted at all times. What are the ones that have impacted you? As an adult, what have your financial experiences been? Have you been when they've taken, and this don't happen anymore because no one writes checks, but like go to the grocery store and they say, I'm sorry, we have to decline your check. We can't take it because there's no money in the account. That's a thing. They used to, there was a movie where they did it too, but they used to, you would try to use your credit card and it would get declined and they would call up the credit card company. The credit card company would say, take that card and cut it up. And they would legit take your card and all jerky in front of you and everyone else at the store cut up your card. So everyone knew you didn't have any money. Like that's gonna shape you too. Were those experiences that you had? Were those experiences that your partner had? If so, that's gonna make you feel a certain way. So being able to talk about that, giving couples these things. Why don't you tell me your biggest fear? Why don't you share with your partner your biggest fear about money? What scares you the most about money? Because you might be surprised by the answer. Maybe it's, I'm afraid we're not gonna have enough. Or maybe it's gonna be, I'm afraid money's gonna come in between us. It's a good question to ask. Is there an imbalance of power in your relationship about money issues? If there is, let's address it and fix it. It doesn't mean it's a deal breaker, but if we don't address it, it is. And are there any other hurts or issues that come into play when you talk about finances? Do you throw things in your face? I was working with a couple last night. They're looking at maybe getting some property up in Cloudcroft and building a house. So they're having a conversation about this. And she's kind of like, well, I'm not sure. You know, I feel like maybe we're not quite to the point where we should take that financial step right now. And he's like, but hey, aren't you spending $4,000 tomorrow to do blah, blah, blah? So it's not even about the money, it's about the hurt of like, you're telling me I can't spend my money, but you're spending money tomorrow. Like, so we get in this like competition type thing, which is more than just money, it's that hurt, the hurt feelings. You told me no, and that hurt my feelings because you had no problem buying XYZ, but now that I want to buy something, you're telling me no. So these are all really helpful questions and prompts that you can give couples to talk to each other about to be able to come up with some sort of better understanding of where they are financially, to be proactive instead of reactive. Questions? All right, this Thursday, you're gonna have an activity to do that is an individual activity, because there's no point in y'all budgeting for each other. Like, money's very personal. So you will not come to class, but there will be an assignment on Canvas for you to do. It will be due on Thursday, so it'll open up that morning. You'll have all day to do it, but it needs to be turned in Thursday night. My recommendation is at 10:30, sit down and do it. You'll be done with it by 11:45. It'll be just like you were here, except you don't get to listen to me yammer on. Don't forget to do it though, all right? And then we will meet again next Tuesday and talk about it. All right, guys, have a good week.